All right, last week we summited Mount Stupid. This week we are going to attempt to not crash the Titanic into the Iceberg of Ignorance. So, a lot of alliteration there, but go ahead, stick around with us. Roll the intro. This is Plays Well with Others.
This is Plays Well with Others. Thanks for listening.
All right. So, in our latest episode in the series of alliterative business terms, we're going to talk about the Iceberg of Ignorance. So, I've learned a lot about this one recently. I was not familiar with the term until, 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Dunning-Kruger and how the concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect is essentially how it's a description of how we learn, right? So, you start off knowing nothing, presumably, and then you learn a little bit, and you summit Mount Stupid, which is when your confidence outpaces your competence, and you know a very little, and you think you know everything, followed immediately after by the Valley of Despair when you realize you don't know nothing, and then you learn, and in step 3, profit. So the Iceberg of Ignorance is the result of a study by a guy named Sidney Yoshida in 1989. So it's got some years on her, but it's a description of how many layers of management you have to go through before you finally see all of the problems in an organization. And so the specific percentage is that only 4% of problems are known to executive leadership. 9% of problems are known to team managers, 74% known to team leaders, and 100% known to individual contributors. And honestly, the drop-off between team leads and managers seems absolutely absurd to me. But
it's wild. Like, really.
It's like, I can get executives not knowing a ton. Am I defending it? No. But I can get it. But to say that 9% of problems versus 4% at the executive level. So that's
not that much more. Like that,
No.
or not that. Yeah, yeah. And then 74%. I mean, that is like a wild difference. It really is a wild difference. It makes me question everything I do at work and want to start digging into everything so that I am not at the 4% mark.
Right. And I think that is an important takeaway, because there's any number of books that I can quote, but the one that I'm thinking of is, it was actually Crucial Conversations, which is not directly related, but the idea of the conversation you don't want to have the most is probably the one you need to have.
Yeah.
The same mentality goes into my head of the thing you know the least about or want to know the least about is probably the thing you need to go learn.
I mean, it is interesting though, because, coming from the field that I'm in as a product owner, a lot of times that leads me down rabbit trails of going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into processes. Because, I mean, every process can be laid out on a hierarchy, right? You have the 10,000 foot overview. That's a pretty little workflow. It's a happy path workflow. And then each of those little squares on that workflow, you can dig deeper and deeper into and really start to dissect what's happening. And I mean, I remember at a previous company, we had a little checkbox in our overarching process for the entire company where we had to, save information in case we ever went to court, right? How we handled issues and exceptions and, quality issues on any of our whatever that we produced. And so in case we ever got involved in a lawsuit, we needed to keep all of that. You start digging deeper and deeper and deeper into that process, and you find out that a lot of the really crucial information is stored in a spreadsheet for this like really big company. And so you start realizing, okay, as a product owner, like the best way I can serve my company is to find a way to move this into a database so that it's secure and we have backups and we have ways to control access, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't get that from that executive level. At the 4% mark, it's working. Everything's fine. Nobody's crying about it. We move on over it. And I vividly remember this conversation where we were prioritizing with our executives, and that was on the list. And our CFO was like, why are we spending money on this? This doesn't make any sense. Like, that already works. And so we had to expose the underbelly of what was going on. And after we explained it, he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. But, it really is like you get that, and everybody talks about that snapshot that, the leadership comes in and draws all these conclusions from a snapshot. So how, as middle leaders, these, maybe leads, maybe managers, how are you digging in? How are you lifting up information so that those people at the 100% mark, their voices matter and you make them heard?
So that was the question I was going to ask. Which side or which direction holds the accountability or the responsibility for that drop off? And
it has to be those middle leaders, right? I
yes
don't
and
think
no,
it's
right?
the team lead. I think it's the manager that, and it's everybody's responsibility to a certain extent. I'm not trying to undervalue the importance of each of these different roles. But if there's a difference of that magnitude between manager and lead, there's a reason for that.
Yes. And the thing that I wonder is how much of that is a lack of discovery or a lack of engagement from that team manager versus how much of that is a lack of clarity on how and when and why to escalate problems.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get one thing out of the way really fast, though. Some of this percentage difference is just because there's less people as you go higher and higher. And less people means they're going to have less ability to have oversight over everything. That's just going to be a truth. There's no getting around the fact that as you go higher in a company, there's less and less people on each level. So those people can have less depth of knowledge in each area. So
Right.
I do think to a certain extent, there's never going to be 100% at the executive level. It's not feasible. However,
No.
to your point, how do we make sure the right things are lifted up so that the right items get pushed up to the top? And there's a very distinct difference there.
Yeah, and see, here's the issue. That's a great talking point, and we're 7 minutes in. It's one that I absolutely wanted to bring up, so here we are. How much of this, because I've done no significant thought into how I think about the iceberg of ignorance. Like, is it good? Is it bad? What does that mean? What do we do about it? Because I wanted to save that for us, for here. But is it wrong that only 4% of problems are known to executives? And should we have a target? Because I think there's value in, again, there's no commentary on that 4%. Maybe that 4% are the biggest problems in the company, and the other 96% are annoyances or
waste of
things
their
that don't
time.
impact profit.
That's possible. To me, 4% seems too low, but I have nothing to base that off of. That is 100% just my personal opinion.
Yeah, is it 4% by
however-
volume or by units,
Right.
by count?
Quantity over quality, right? And versus quality over quantity. So let's say that 4% is a absolute static number and it can never grow. Let's say executives are just, there's too few of them over too much of a company. They have too little, ability to dive deeper due to just personal inability to dive that deep because they're one person, right? So let's say that 4% is an absolute non-negotiable. That's what it's going to be. There is still a way to waste your 4%, right? So your 4% could be the person who's screaming the loudest, and that's what you care about this week. And next week, it's the next person who's screaming the loudest. And then all of a sudden, your 4% is flighty and ineffective and leaves no room for execution down the road. Or your 4% could be a personal choice of, I refuse to hear garbage. I refuse to be distracted from these things because these are the things that are going to change our company. These are the things that are going to make our company successful. And that's a very different conversation. And that's a very different leader.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference in the phrasing here. So it's problems known to executives. So I think we can exclude the noise, or rather we can include the noise because I've heard it. Now I know about it. I'm not going to do anything about it, but I know about it now. And I think it comes back to what we talked about. It might have been in the last episode or the episode before that around the shift in mindset around observability. From a technologist perspective, we've always thought about service availability as the be all end all. Is my application running? Is it doing what it's supposed to do in the amount of time it's supposed to do it? But as we have undergone varying degrees of digital transformation, it's become more and more important that we blur the lines between technical availability and technical performance and business performance. And so it allows you to know a lot more and have a lot less overhead in that knowledge. The example of the FedEx CEO that comes in and sits down and looks at his dashboard on his wall, and he's got 3 business lines that are green, green, green. Great. Now I can go worry about the 4% that I know about and care about.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I do think that's a really cool way to handle the executives only have so much time and only so much capability because they're a smaller group.
I can. You should go back and listen to that episode, the one that I'm thinking of.
A previous, just go listen to all of them. You'll catch it.
Right. I think it's episode 30, but I think you should play it safe and start from episode 1. And when you find
just
it,
work your way all the way through.
right. When you find
Let
it,
us know.
let us know in the comments. See, this is how you build engagement.
Perfect.
Go back and listen to all of them and then come tell me what you thought. But no, in all seriousness, we used to use terms in technology like monitoring and alerting. And the whole idea was you've got a guy, an operations guy that's got a pager, and he does nothing but be on call. And when something goes down, he gets a page, he goes in, he hits the button to reboot the thing, and it comes back, and now we're happy and healthy. But as we have undergone digital transformation, which again, remember the concept of digital transformation is not making more people responsible for technology, but allowing more people to have influence on technology and leverage the power of technology. We have shifted to the phrase observability or the term observability versus monitor and alert. Because in 2023, there are so many failure modes in a distributed system that doesn't always mean that the system is down. It doesn't mean that you're unable to work. It means that you may have degraded service, but you can still do things. And so instead of red and green, we now have red, yellow, green. So it's not completely down, but it's degraded. I'm unable to do things as well as I used to. So the case study was from Cisco's App Dynamics, which is an observability platform. Used to be an APM or an application performance monitoring platform, but now it's a full-fledged observability platform. The case study is for FedEx, and there are several others that are actually really interesting. One being Under Armour, and then Carnival Cruise Lines uses it too.
Interesting.
It's a neat platform. But the case study is that FedEx has defined their business KPIs so well that they don't have to. They do, but they don't have to only monitor service availability. They can see the impact of service unavailability in how many packages make it onto a truck, or how many shipping labels are printed, or how many tracking requests are made through the website, because they know ultimately what measures their success is moving boxes from A to B. So they've built dashboards so that the CEO or varying levels of leadership comes in and sits down at their desk, and they see bars or circles or whatever for the business units, business lines that they're responsible for. And if they're all green, then I know that my performance is up to snuff. It's what it usually is. And I know if they're not green, if they're yellow or red, then I know where to drill into, and I know who to call, and I know what to dig up, because I don't have time to sit here and wonder if the messaging widget service being down impacts my
Yeah.
shipping logistics, or if it impacts my printers in Kinko's. I've got to be able to tell within a half a second, are we good or are we not?
And that is a perfect use case for how, you know, why maybe 74% or 71% of all issues are known by leads, because they see a significant breakdown of what makes it yellow versus your managers and your executives. Maybe they just see the green or they see the yellow, but they don't necessarily need to know every individual issue that's going on at any given point in time. And that might be a successful way to utilize this 4% of the executive's time. Oh, I know that we're yellow here, so I'm going to watch that, or I'm going to maybe drill into it a little bit today because it's yellow, versus, them having to have, like Andrew's talking about, all of these alerts and then having to construe what they mean. Of course, a lead or an individual contributor is going to be better at that.
Well, I think that's where...
Because they know they're in the weeds.
Exactly. And I think this is maybe a philosophical question, and I'm sure if you read Yoshida's full study, he makes these comments. But if you look at the definition of a problem, I don't think, depending on the size of the company, but I don't think that a CEO needs to care that there is unit test tech debt in one service of the microservice architecture. But if that CEO knows that there is poor testing, which results in customer quality issues, that's a very similar problem, but I think they're two distinct problems, right?
Yeah. And I just kind of thinking through this a little bit and talking, pulling the full thread here. Overall, the reason that I think 4% is not good is because I've seen things get hidden from executives by middle management. I've seen that in the wild. And I've heard the reasons why it happens. Things get taken out of decks because they don't want to look like they're failing. They don't want to look like they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So they obfuscate problems and report out to executives a cleaner, more succinct update. And I do think that causes fragility in an organization, because when your top executives don't have visibility into the full breadth and scope of issues, it means that they can't address them. And when you can't address a problem because you don't know it's there, what happens? It festers, right? If you've stubbed your toe, that's probably not something your executive, high-functioning brain really needs to be concerned about. But if you've sliced your toe off and it's starting to get infected, you know what? It's a good thing you've got those neuroreceptors that are sending back that feedback to your brain so you can deal with the situation and make sure you're okay. This is where the quality of information that's getting filtered out becomes very important. So there's a slippery slope here when it's that shockingly low of a number, that 4%. I find that incredibly hard to believe that they have insight into all of the important issues within an organization, because no organization is without some security holes or process gaps or some sort of issue that might contribute to, nefarious activity from internal or external sources, some sort of potential failure to their processes that could, exacerbate if they grow bigger or, take on more clients, etc. These things, like those little chinks in the armor, they have a really bad possibility of turning into something really, really big. And you don't want to be the executive that's only hearing about something when it's catastrophic rather than when it's something that's preventable.
That's the interesting part, kind of pivoting over to what do we do about it. There's I think we agree that 4%, 9%, those are bad numbers. I think we agree that you can make an argument to make 4% and 9% sound better, but ultimately it's not ideal. So,
because no matter what happens, they're making decisions with partial information.
yeah, I really want to go down that rabbit trail because I think that's like 80% of being an executive is making decisions with partial information. But digging into that, what do we do about those numbers? Those are rookie numbers. How do we get those up? I think the biggest application is how you develop and distribute strategic vision and how that gets converted into tactical execution. We've talked about OKR before, right? And the big focus of OKR is how you disseminate down a strategy into execution. But the other side of that is I don't know that it's codified in OKR, is in how the information bubbles back up. Once you've trickled down the strategy, how do you influence that strategy knowing what we know boots on the ground, and how does that get developed?
So that's an interesting topic. And I think it has a lot to do with the culture of an organization and how you've positioned your organization to handle hard conversations. Are you an organization that punishes failure outright, that is going to, if somebody brings up a problem, now all of a sudden they're in trouble because of this issue? Or are you an organization that when a problem comes to light, you're less focused on pointing fingers and you don't allow that toxic behavior within meetings where people are pointing at other people and throwing other people under the bus, and you don't allow that toxic behavior, but instead you focus on a solution, action items for the future on how you could all do better as a company. Maybe not, if you're going to call someone out, doing it offline, so it's not now part of the experience that people expect is being called out in a meeting in front of everyone. There's things you can do that make the environment that you're existing within an open and honest dialogue. And how leaders respond to feedback can be a big impact on how teams participate in conversations. When you're presenting your OKR, is everyone absolutely silent? Nobody has anything to say. Are they asking questions? Are they pushing back on things? Are they questioning deadlines? Are they trying to understand how this thing is going to do this thing here? How are we going to achieve that? That timeline seems really tight. What are we putting down to pick this up? Are those questions coming up when you're talking about your OKRs? Because then you have an environment where it's okay to voice your opinion because it's going to be respected and heard and appreciated.
I think you're 100% right. I'm gonna take us a step further though, because the way that you're presenting OKR is, here's what we're doing. I think there's
Already you've made some mistakes if that's what you're doing.
Well, I don't know that it's a mistake because you didn't imply that there was steps before that, but there are always steps before presenting your OKR.
Right.
And so there's an important aspect of developing objectives that come from upending the iceberg of ignorance. You've got to go find out what you don't know. You know that the CEO has said, I want to grow sales by 40% this year, or I want to increase revenue 2x. Okay, well, fine. Let's go figure out how I'm going to do that. As a technologist, as a leader of a technology department, I'm going to have different solutions than the guy in sales is going to have. So I'm going to start out by saying, okay, well, I think there's an assumption that to increase sales, I need to make the website more performant. I need to, I'm probably going to make a guess, marketing wants to do some campaigns. I need to make it easier for those campaigns to make it into my website. Maybe there's SMS capabilities or emails or drip campaigns, all of that we don't have the capability for today. I'm going to go develop those. Fine. But if I come out and say that's my objective is to create more marketing capabilities for our website to allow for increase in sales and profitability. I'm going to have key results. I'm going to say create 3 different technical capabilities for customer engagement, customer feedback, whatever. And then I go talk to my engineering manager. And the engineering manager says, well, that's all well and good, but have you thought about the fact that our website is a complete atrocious monolith, and by adding one of these new campaign possibilities, it's going to take 6 months of engineering to build it so that the website doesn't fall over as soon as you deploy it. Oops. So there's no amount of engagement at that point is going to salvage that. And you'll notice the nuance here. I didn't go talk to my engineering manager and say, what should we do? Like, tell me what the objective is. I said, here's what I think it is. We're trying to increase sales 2x. I've talked to the marketing VP. I've talked to the CMO. I've talked to the sales guys. They all think that additional campaign possibilities would help us reach that goal of 2x sales. How do we do that? That's how you inform the KR. And guess what? Now I've learned another subset of problems that when I develop my OKR that says, okay, well, we can't give you 3 more campaign possibilities, but what I can give you is a refactor that improves scalability. When my CEO asks me, why are you doing that instead of giving me more campaigns? I can say, well, guess what, guy? There's this big giant problem that's been staring us in the face. Now's the time to solve it. And this is how we get to more campaigns in next quarter or next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because when you really start to break down those numbers, yes, I think we've all agreed that the number is shockingly small as you get higher on the iceberg of ignorance. But I think deconstructing how to engage your team in a successful manner, how to open up avenues of communication, how to filter out what's important and what's not important, maybe just urgent but not important. Those things can be really, really impactful for not only broadening that percentage, but also making sure that the things that filter into that percentage are the things that you should have there. As a project manager, I think it's been my experience that my most important role is lifting up the voices of the people doing the work. And we've had projects that have been trucking along and the executive stakeholders are super happy. The managers involved all think that they have everything figured out. And then you start pulling in the SMEs and calling them by name and asking them to talk, calling them by name and asking them to participate in the conversation. And they say things that completely derail things. Oh, the manager didn't fully understand the process, so what we thought was going to work isn't going to work. Or, oh, we had no idea that we were running into this kind of issue. We didn't account for that in how we were going to roll it out. So it's just, one component of how the people with feet on the ground, they're the ones that you really want to have a way to talk to.
Yeah, I think we've all witnessed, or most people have witnessed, what happens when you strong arm a strategy and you come out with pomp and circumstance and say, hurrah, this is what we're going to do. And there are untold challenges with that. Like
Cortez. Maybe you could tell that story.
Mercy. Mercy. So I'm going to put this delicately for whoever's listening, but there was an approach at a past company, I won't tell you which one, that wanted to vastly change how they did business from a technology standpoint. And it was rip and replace to probably the biggest degree I've seen. And the project was codenamed Cortez because Cortez burned his ships so that his armies would not feel the need or see the capability to turn around and run.
Success was the only option.
Right, only forward. And I made the historical comment as we have lit the ships on fire and everything's burning. There were organizational changes, there's technology changes in flight, there were layoffs. The whole thing is getting upended and shook out on the floor and stomped on. I made the historical comment that I think we might should have gotten off the boats before we lit them on fire. And
it's one of my favorite quotes ever.
In the moment, it landed very well, and it very nicely encapsulated what we felt. But practically, how do you use that? You've come out
as a template of what not to do.
Right, you've come out strong with a strategy that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and that has issues. Okay, if you ask the question first and you say, look, this is what we need to do, how do we get there? And you involve at least those managers and leads to get to a reasonable approach, then you don't have that immediate visceral response with, oh my Lord, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why are we doing this? You've got people engaged. You've got people at least trying to solve the problem with you versus trying to hide under their desk so they don't become the next target.
Yeah. And I do think for me, that experience, going through that experience, set a course in my career that would never have happened otherwise. Because what it made me really the most passionate about was learning how to implement organizational change successfully. And the things that I learned in that experience were, anytime I go into a new organization, if I'm brought in, and most of the time I'm hired because they need to stand up a project management office or a product ownership office, or they need to revitalize what they currently have because it's not working. Normally, I'm not brought in because things are great and I'm just taking over something that exists. I'm normally brought in to fix or create, which means that there can sometimes be immediate bad blood because people don't like change naturally. So the main thing I learned from that experience was not to walk in and just assume I knew everything. Assume that what I was going to do was going to be perfect, or that because I've done it at another organization, I could do it perfectly at this organization. It taught me respect for the people that are there, because there is a journey that they've been on that you're walking in mid-journey. They've done things that you look at and you go, this is nuts. And then you hear why. And you go, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. I understand now. So that was the main thing I walked away from that. And it's just such a component of leadership that I think gets overlooked, is really truly listening and respecting the people that you're steward of them, right? As a leader, you're steward of these people in your charge. You need to respect them. You need to listen to them. You need to hear why they've come to this point. And maybe that doesn't mean what they're doing is right? Maybe it means that there is absolutely a path to get them into a better place. But if you can come into it with empathy and acknowledging why they've come there, you start out on a much better playing field with them.
Yes, and that is an entirely new episode, which we've done that topic before on change management, which is, wow, that's an old one. Episode 5, dealing with change. So go check that one out. It sounds like there's value to continue in this conversation with a bent toward the leader's approach to delivering objectives and delivering vision, and the colleague or the individual contributor's approach to receiving that and providing feedback. So if you're interested in seeing that, go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know, please. But this has been Plays Well with Others, and thanks for listening.